You know, Adam, this ruling feels like it's from another planet. It is a ruling about how we want an energetic executive that's not too constrained by worries about overzealous prosecutors breathing down its neck after he leaves office. That's not the world we're living in. We're living in a world with a guy who is the most likely occupant of the office is Trump himself, who has shown every indication to push his authority beyond legal bounds. This podcast is brought to you by BetterHelp. Welcome to Beg to Differ, the Bulwark's weekly roundtable discussion featuring civil conversation across the political spectrum. We range from center-left to center-right. I'm Mona Charan, syndicated columnist and policy editor at the Bulwark, and I'm joined by one of our regulars, Linda Chavez of the Niskanen Center. Damon Linker is off this week, and Bill Galston was supposed to be here, but he had a computer problem, and so we're going to have to soldier on without him. Fortunately, sitting in this week is Chris Cillizza. Welcome back. And our special guest is former Congressman Adam Kinzinger, who is also a new contributor, I'm proud to say, of the Bulwark, and was one of only 2 Republicans to serve on the January 6th committee and belongs in the Roll of Honor for how he managed all of that. So thanks, guys, for being here. Let us begin with the Supreme Court. It is, I guess, my misfortune that I am still capable of being shocked. And I didn't see this one coming. I cannot believe that a conservative majority, all 6, 5.5 by some counts, but basically all 6 members of the conservative majority on the Supreme Court issued a ruling that may go down in history as the worst since Korematsu. It is an outrage. Well, I'll leave the editorializing for later. Adam Kinzinger, are you as shocked as I am at the way the thing came out? Weren't you expecting something more? Well, on the one hand, on the other hand, and we have to have certain zones of presidential privilege, but other things are fair game.
Yeah, I mean, look, I was shocked they even took up the case, to be honest with you, because I think it made sense to be like, we're gonna stick with the lower court on this. One of them, I don't know, it was Kavanaugh or something that said like, we're going to be writing a ruling for the ages. And it used to be that us conservatives believed that they didn't write rulings for the ages. They just,
decide cases.
Decide cases. So yeah, it was a huge shock. And honestly, I'm very worried about it, particularly pair that with a Donald Trump victory. And literally there's nothing stopping him at that point. So it blew me away. It feels like a really dark week because of that.
Super dark. Linda, it was Gorsuch, I think, who said, we're writing a rule for the ages. And of course, so one of the truly shocking, there's so many shocking aspects of this. I mean, it's completely antithetical to the whole we are textualists, we are originalists posture that they've always presented. I mean, this violates the most basic reading of the United States Constitution, which recognizes that there will be situations where presidents would be impeached and then prosecuted. And the 2 crimes that the Constitution itself mentions are treason and bribery and other high crimes. And it's impossible under this court's ruling to prosecute a president for bribery now, because they have ruled that is within his exclusive zone of privilege and of immunity. And so it makes it absolutely impossible to bring a case.
In fact, they sort of exemplified that by saying you can't even use motive. So we know that, the selling of pardons, for example. I wonder what pardons are going to be going for in the next
oh
Trump
my God,
millions. Absolutely.
Millions.
I mean, appointments. You want to be ambassador? Well, how many million are you willing to give? Not how much are you willing to spend on a campaign or contribute to the festivities of the inauguration, but how many you're going to put in my pocket.
Absolutely.
I mean, you mentioned Korematsu. I was sort of thinking through in my mind, where does this rank? This ranks right up there with not only Korematsu, but in the 20th century, Buck versus Bell, which had to do with forced sterilization of people who were deemed to be mentally deficient. I think it goes, in terms of the heart of the Constitution, right where Plessy v. Ferguson and Dred Scott go. I mean, this decision absolutely undermines the idea that every person in the United States, up to and including the most powerful person in the country, is subject to the law. We are a nation of laws, not a nation of rulers and kings and men who make their own law. And I, again, with you, Mona, I mean, we're both conservatives. So is Adam Kinzinger. I could not have imagined this. And I think I said on the show, this is going to be decided. Yeah, maybe it'll be, 8-1, maybe it'll be 7-2, but there's no way that they are going to grant immunity. But they went so broad in this, granting immunity, not just for official acts, but you can't even use the evidence of the motive of unofficial acts. And this is, it's just beyond fathoming.
Within the outer perimeter of his official acts. And God only knows what that means. So, Chris, back in the days of Watergate, which, was formative for some of us, I was in high school during Watergate, and I remember watching those hearings. And I also remember that Nixon gave his famous interview to David Frost after he had already left office. And he said those infamous words when he was asked about his actions. He said the infamous words, well, if the president does it, it's not illegal.
Yep.
And it was like the entire country erupted and said, fella, no. Nobody is above the law.
Right.
And the Supreme Court ruled 8-zip, against him, including Republican appointees. And here we are.
Yeah, I was thinking of that, Mona. The reaction at the time to Nixon saying that was, well, this is sort of proof positive of sort of his malignancy and his misunderstanding of sort of how a president should operate, right? Like if you needed anything else, like this is obviously hindsight being 2020. This is sort of the crowning moment where Nixon reveals that he just doesn't get it in some meaningful way about democracy and the Constitution. Right. The thing that I keep thinking, and now obviously we have the Supreme Court, the highest country and the highest court in the land, saying effectively that, because I think the issue here, and I will say, not a lawyer, much to the chagrin of my mother, but the thing that struck me is the Pandora's box nature of this, because it wasn't even the day of the ruling. It was actually earlier this week. Trump's lawyers in the Stormy Daniels, I don't know what we're calling it, hush money, Stormy Daniels, falsifying business records, whatever. On Monday, they appealed to the judge to delay sentencing so that they can pursue vacating Trump's 34 felony convictions because of this ruling. Now, just think about that just for a minute on what we know, right? This has to do with the payment to Stormy Daniels in 2016, when Donald Trump was not the president of the United States. I think we struggle sometimes to agree on facts, but it's hard for me that you could disagree that in 2016, Donald Trump was not the president of the United States. And yet we are seeing immediate legal repercussions in the hush money case based on the idea that evidence that he was submitted during that case that had to do with official acts. So that to me, like, again, even as a non-lawyer, I was like, my gosh, like if we are talking about something where like provably he wasn't president of the United States at that point, and yet it's retroactively now being used to kind of try to shoehorn him out of his felony conviction. I don't think it's going to get better legally. I don't think lawyers are going to all of a sudden say, like, you know what, we pushed that too far. That's usually not that business. And so I think it's a dark vision of things to come.
And Mona, can I add
Absolutely.
on that? Because
yeah.
I just there's two broad things that really get me on this. First off, what prosecutor in the future is ever going to take up a case against a former president now? And then if they do, and let's say even with Donald Trump's cases, let's say he miraculously, by the favor of Jesus and Allah and everybody loses in November, then so now the lower court has to decide what charges get thrown out and what doesn't. The Supreme Court gave no answers to that. So now what I foresee is if Judge Chutkan makes a decision that X charge can stay and Y charge can't that then now have to be appealed all the way up to the Supreme Court?
It can. They explicitly said it can. That's an interlocutory appeal.
Yep.
So yes.
How many more years is this going to drag?
Years and years and years. And in the go ahead, Linda.
Mona, I was just going to say, in terms of the financial documents case, which we'll call it, I think they could end up getting a mistrial over and have to go back and retry the case. You had Madeleine Westerhout.
Which won't happen.
Yeah, right, which they will decide not to do. But you had Madeleine Westerhout testifying. You had Hope Hicks testifying. And they were testifying about what Donald Trump was doing on particular days when he was the president of the United States.
That's exactly right.
So, it's
that's
all over.
That's exactly right.
And
so that one is gone.
Mona, can I just say to the congressman's point, like, I think it's really, really important that we recognize that, like, Donald Trump has been remarkably successful pursuing throughout his life, including more obviously the last 5 or 6 years, but pursuing a legal strategy of delay. Yeah, that's how he quote unquote wins, right? He very rarely wins if it like goes to a judgment, but he wins by delay. And this, and I would argue he's won legally by delay now. And this will, to the congressman's point, this only gives him another tool in that tool belt, even if he does lose, to make this go on, well beyond 2025, 2026 and beyond.
Adam, this ruling feels like it's from another planet. It is a ruling about how we want an energetic executive that's not too constrained by worries about overzealous prosecutors breathing down its neck after he leaves office. That's not the world we're living in. We're living in a world with a guy who is the most likely occupant of the office is Trump himself, who has shown every indication to push his authority beyond legal bounds. And so there's that this whole executive authority thing that they're worried about is just crazy. It's not looking at the plain threat right in front of us. But I wanted to also ask you about one other thing because of your military background. Even soldiers on the battlefield don't have immunity, right? I mean, you can't go out and just do anything in order to be an energetic member of the military, right? I mean, we say, yeah, we want you to be energetic, but you can't commit crimes, right?
Yep. And it's two things. So first off, this ruling, you said it feels like it's from another planet. Here's what it feels like. I've dealt a lot with developing democracies in my time in Congress. And one of my favorite countries is Georgia. But one of the problems Georgia has had is the ruling party, which is very corrupt, very in bed with Russia, has turned the Supreme Court into their basically, and you see this in all authoritarian countries. You see it in El Salvador, where my wife's from. And that's what this feels like here is this is a Supreme Court that is not a check on the presidency. It's become a tool of the presidency. And what shocks me more than anything is John Roberts, for God's sakes. This is the one guy of all of them that I'm trying to figure out how in the hell he got to the point he did. But yeah, on the immunity issue, look, I think we all can agree, let's use the old Obama drone strike, example. If Obama orders a drone strike overseas, he cannot be charged or sued for that, right? The difference is if a president is doing something on behalf of the country, and this is where the Supreme Court could have gone, on behalf of the entire country or on behalf of his duties as commander in chief, whatever it is, then he has immunity. However, if he's doing something, even with the office of the presidency, on behalf of himself and on behalf of, by extension, a political party, can't we at least agree that shouldn't be immune? That, yes, a drone strike against a terrorist that kills an American, that should be immune. Trying to overthrow an election to benefit yourself, there is no compelling argument now for anybody in office, Joe Biden, Donald Trump, anybody in the future, to ever relinquish power. Why would you? Because if you fail at relinquishing power, or if you succeed at not relinquishing power, you're in charge, can't be charged for that anyway. And if you fail at keeping power, well, they can't prosecute you for it anyway. So what is the motivation for somebody that doesn't have a moral center? And we've seen so many politicians that don't have a moral center.
Right, exactly. And Linda, this ruling, again, I don't recognize this court. I don't recognize John Roberts at all. This is not, it's total invasion of the body snatchers territory here. They say, well, if it's an unofficial act, then the president can be prosecuted and he doesn't have no immunity. Well, who cares? What we're concerned about are abuse of his official powers.
Right. It should be worse.
That's what
right.
It should be worse.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, this whole structure, and by the way, sorry to rant, but the court that told us that we had, too much executive power and we had to, I thought the Chevron ruling, for example, was correct, right? Too much power in the executive agencies, pare that back. Great. But now they are handing so much unfettered power of a really dangerous nature to a clearly dangerous person, without even a backward glance. And by the way, I thought both dissents were great. And I was annoyed as hell at Roberts for his snippy, sort of sarcastic dismissal of the dissents, saying, basically he was saying you're being hysterical. And I'm sorry, they were being realistic. And Sotomayor, who I frequently disagree with, let me add.
I testified against her. I testified against her becoming a justice of the Supreme Court.
Right. Okay. So I frequently disagree with her, and I've frequently disagreed with her rulings. But when she said, with fear for my country or fear for our democracy, I forget how she signed her, I thought, amen,
Absolutely.
sister. That's right.
One of the things, first of all, I thought it was a badly written decision, among other things. It was so
it was complete mud.
The difference between conclusive and preclusive,
I know.
all of this stuff in there that it was really terrible. But the one thing that, that I thought about is if they thought it was so hysterical, the SEAL Team 6 example, all right?
Yeah.
They could have said, well, of course, that would never be permissible. The president of the United States could not order the execution of somebody running against him. How would they feel if, maybe Joe Biden decides, well, there's one way to make sure that Donald Trump doesn't get into office. I got SEAL Team 6 here. Pick up the phone. Let's dispense him. We could solve this tomorrow. They left open the possibility of the absolute worst, Putin-like behavior being conducted by the president, as long as he was doing it, I guess, from the Oval Office and, had the
saying this is an official act.
It's an official act. This is, I think for the good of the country, I must, it was, as I say, it was unfathomable. I feel ashamed. I worked to help some of these people get onto the Supreme Court. I worked against Sotomayor being on the Supreme Court because I did not agree with her judicial philosophy. I feel now so duped
Me too.
by these folks. It is embarrassing. I am embarrassed.
And real quick on that SEAL Team 6 example, and here's a question. So, as a military guy, it's okay. Let's say hypothetically, Joe Biden says, hey, SEAL Team 6, take care of Donald Trump. Okay. Now, by our oath, we cannot execute an illegal order. So obviously, SEAL Team 6 would not do that. The question is, and it's kind of hypothetical and weird, but there's a lot of gray area in between is, okay, as the Supreme Court just said, if the president gets it, it by definition cannot be an illegal order. Now, maybe you can still say, well, it's still illegal and whatever, and I hope that's the case. But that's what creates this level of gray area where you can imagine a president giving an order. A commander says, sir, that's an illegal order. And he says, look, I'm the president. Nothing I do is illegal, including this order. And you can imagine the pressure on the commanding officer at that point.
Right. And Trump said that when he was president, he said under Article 2, I can do whatever I want. And we all thought, there he goes, sounding like Richard Nixon. What an idiot. He doesn't understand our constitutional order. And here we are. So, Chris, you were going to say something about that.
The congressman mentioned sort of moral center. And I think what's really hard is that we now have a system in place where we have to assume that whoever we put in that office has the moral wherewithal not to do some of the things that we're talking about, right? Like that's ultimately the constraint is like, well, no, I'm not going to assassinate or ask to assassinate a political opponent because that's wrong, right? Like what we tell our kids, right? Yeah. Slapping someone and certainly murdering someone is bad. The problem I find is that, like, my view, I really don't think this is a partisan viewpoint. Like, Donald Trump is, like, effectively amoral. I mean, he's not, I don't think he lives in that kind of world where it's like there's good and bad. There's good for him and there's bad for him, but that's not morality, right? I mean, that's like a kid can think like candy is good and broccoli is bad, but that's not a moral structure. And that's what worries me because we've already seen this multiple times. Like I just was thinking back to the classified documents thing. Remember him saying like, well, they were declassified because I'm the president. I didn't tell anyone, but I just declassified them. It's like, that's not how any of this works. Like there's a system in place, but if you're willing to push and push and push norms, what we found is the system, and it's usually the legal system, honestly, the legal system isn't really ready for a Donald Trump-like person. I totally get all of the innocent until proven guilty, and the onus is on the prosecutor, not on the defense. The problem is those are good things to have structurally in our system, period. The problem is that he takes advantage of any loophole in politics or legally and to use to his advantage. And that's what we're dealing with, right? And the moral center thing, you would think like, surely we'll never elect anyone where that'll be an issue. But we have once, and I would argue today we are on the way to doing it again.
Yeah. I mean, and 100%. And to come back to Adam's point, so imagine that. So one of the aspects of this ruling that is so bad was the one part that Amy Coney Barrett refused to join with, which was this idea, this ruling that you cannot take the president's motives into account when you're judging whether something that he did was official or unofficial. And she points out in her concurrence that, well, wait a minute. I mean, how are you supposed to prove, for example, bribery if you can't introduce evidence that the president, was bribed and that, the money went into his account, et cetera, or whatever, because that's all immune. So that sort of vitiates the whole thing. And it's broader than that. So, for example, when he's acting in an official capacity, and I'll direct this to Adam. One of the laws that we would have hoped could have been overturned in anticipation of the possibility of a second Trump term, but which isn't going to happen because the Republicans took the House, was reforming the Insurrection Act, which gives the president tremendous power. And unfortunately, it's going to still be there like a loaded gun sitting on the table if, God forbid, he comes back. And, you can easily, after this Supreme Court decision, you can easily imagine a situation where there is unrest in the country, that you've got anti-Trump people in the streets and pro-Trump people in the streets. And Trump gives an order to a federalized National Guard saying, shoot the anti-Trump protesters, shoot to kill, and don't, leave the other people alone. They're not here to hurt me, as he said, during the January 6th thing, right? And you cannot introduce that as evidence against him in a trial ever, because that's an official act.
And I would argue he would be immune. And, look, the Insurrection Act exists. I've always said, even before this immunity decision, it's a real danger that if the president does it, and, ultimately, whether he's right to do it or not, would have to go to the Supreme Court to determine. This Supreme Court now all of a sudden would find, textual Jesus again and say, well, yeah, according to the Constitution, this is the case. And this is another quick thing, just not to pull up a whole different subject, but on January 6th, one of the goals of the insurrectionists was simply to delay this enough so that, by definition, it's not done on the day of January 6th. Technically, it would have to go to the House because they have not, certified a winner. The House would have voted for Donald Trump. And I used to tell that it's like, that's one of the motives, and people shake their head. Well, that could never happen. Well, yeah, because all of a sudden, if Mike Pence would have decided now it's time for the House to vote for the president because they've been unable to certify Joe Biden, obviously that would be challenged up to the Supreme Court. And I now believe the Supreme Court would be totally in for Donald Trump on that. And we could have had ourselves really a civil war at that point if something like that happens. So that's the danger we have here now.
Yeah.
This is what Project 2025 is all about, is finding these legal tools to get this done. And it sounds like the Supreme Court is unwilling to step in and stop it.
Yeah. Linda, one other thing about this whole, the so-called conservatives, I don't even know if they deserve that. This is a radical, terrible decision. One of the things that Roberts was so keen for was to maintain the honor and dignity and respect of the court itself. And he didn't want it to be perceived as partisan, and he didn't. That's in ashes, right?
Absolutely. It's now, I don't know what, if anything, can be done to salvage the reputation of this court. Again, naively, just call me Miss Naive.
Me too.
I kept thinking, well, the reason it's taking so long is that, Roberts is trying to bring some people over to his side, and, he's going to join with Democrats. And obviously that didn't happen. I don't know where we go from here, because I can tell you one thing. You mentioned the Insurrection Act. What do you think the odds are that Donald Trump, if he is inaugurated next year, that he invokes the Insurrection Act almost immediately? First of all, you may have thought that when you were acting, Adam, in your official capacity as a member of the United States House of Representatives, that you couldn't be prosecuted for anything you had done. But he's already said, Liz Cheney, and I presume you as well, are going to be brought up before military tribunals.
Military tribunals.
Guantanamo will have a purpose once again. And you can expect to spend some time there. I mean, we're sort of laughing at this, but it really is serious. It's not funny. It is terrifying. Yeah. I never believed that I would live to see the day that I would be fearful of living in the United States of America in the next few years.
Yeah. And it's not like it's from some, really articulate guy that just, whisks people. It's a fat, stupid reality show host that has taken a once great party and made it an authoritarian vehicle for himself.
Right.
And a clown show all at once. It is just unspeakable. And That's the bitter truth. All right, let's take a break and talk about Miracle Made. It is hot outside, and your bedroom temperature at night has a huge impact on your sleep quality. If you wake up too hot or too cold, I recommend you check out Miracle Made's bed sheets. Miracle Made sheets are inspired by NASA and use silver-infused fabrics that are temperature regulating, so you can sleep at the perfect temperature all night long. They are also self-cleaning because they're infused with silver threads that prevent up to 99.7% of bacterial growth, letting them stay fresher and cleaner 3 times longer than other sheets. Their self-cooling properties help you get a better night's sleep on these hot summer nights. They're designed for your skin, so stop sleeping on bacteria. They have comfort and quality that is akin to what you will find at 5-star hotels, but without the high price tag of other luxury brands. So go to trymiracle.com/beg-to-differ to try Miracle Made sheets today. And whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for a loved one, if you order today, you can save over 40%. If you use our promo code BEG-to-DIFFER at checkout, you'll also get 3 free towels and save another 20%. Miracle is so confident in their product that they back it with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you are not 100% satisfied, you will get a full refund. Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/beg-to-differ and use that code BEG-to-differ to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save another 40%. Again, that's trymiracle.com/beg-to-differ to treat yourself. And we thank Miracle Made for sponsoring this podcast. All right. The other news is breaking even as we speak, because we're recording this on Wednesday, the day before the 4th of July. And there are a number of Democrats who are making noises now along the lines of maybe the best thing would be for President Biden to step aside, to drop out of the race. We have heard from Representative Lloyd Doggett of Texas. We've heard from Mike Quigley, who's from Illinois, which is Representative Kinzinger's former state representing. We also heard from former Representative Tim Ryan, Julian Castro, a bunch, but maybe most significantly, and I'm going to go to you first, Chris Cillizza. We heard from Jim Clyburn, who played the biggest role in 2020 of launching Biden to the nomination by throwing his support behind him in the South Carolina primary, which changed the whole race. Now Clyburn is saying that he would support Kamala Harris if she were the nominee. So what do you make of it? So tell us what you make of the current state of play.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to note that there's no direct analog in modern political history, right? So what I would say is this. Let's say there was a House race, just for example, and one of the two candidates was 81, it doesn't matter which party, and gave a performance like Biden gave. And then the following day, the state and local leaders were like, it wasn't great. Might need like on background, without their names attached to it. And then like a couple days after that, you had like a county chairman be like, I think maybe we'd be better off with someone else. You're right. Which is basically the same progression we followed. I would 100%, if we were talking about the House race, say that candidate will not make it. Right. Like everything that I know about politics suggests that what we are seeing is following a blueprint I've seen and Congressman's seen. I'm sure you've all seen many times before, which is kind of like whispers, turn to less whispers, turn to avalanche, turn to inevitability. Now, this is a president. He's the sitting president of the United States. Right. So it's not a House candidate, not even a Senate candidate. He's also someone who's been in politics for an extremely long time. And it is hard logistically. It is hard to get rid of someone. I always think people think of this stuff like fantasy football. Like, my starting quarterback is hurt. I'll just put him on the injured list, and I'll move up my next guy and put him to start, and then I'll press save and we'll be done. Like, it's not that easy to just be like, okay, Biden out, Harris in, here we go, all done, no problem, or Newsom or whoever. So I think there are logistical challenges, and I think there are challenges in that Joe Biden do not want to leave the race. But it just feels to me like there's an inevitability here, with the caveat that, as I started with, we've not had this at this level before. What I would say is I thought that Joe Biden was a slight underdog before the debate. I think he is more than a slight underdog if he stays in the race. I don't care how many interviews he does with George Stephanopoulos or how good he is at the North Carolina rally the day after. 50 million people watched that debate. That debate was the thing that the Biden campaign circled as, we are going to, before the nominating conventions, before people stop paying attention for the summer, we are going to show people he is up to it. Not only did he not pass that test, in my mind, he failed it miserably. So I just think my view is, if Democrats want to win, I think it is unlikely Joe Biden will be able to win because he can't fix the fundamental problem. He's not going to suddenly be 60 years old, right? I mean, he's going to be every day the problem gets slightly worse and that he gets older. And so I think if I was a gambling person, I would say he does not survive. He politically does not survive and drops off the ballot.
Linda, you and I are both refugees from a party that insisted that we had to deny the evidence of our eyes and ears and just go along with the gaslighting that we were getting from party leaders, et cetera. We said, no.
Right.
And right now, don't you get the feeling that there is a certain amount of gaslighting going on? Tell me what your evaluation is of how the Biden camp has been handling this, that he had a cold.
I know,
it
it's
was
ridiculous.
The travel.
Look,
okay,
it isn't a matter of, look, I'm 4 years younger than Joe Biden. When you're in your late 70s, early 80s, there are going to be times when a word escapes you, when you can't pull up a name as quickly as you used to. That is not what we saw.
No, it's not.
He didn't know where he was. I mean, it was so unbelievable to watch. He admitted apparently to an ally that he almost fell asleep when he was up there. That's why his mouth was hanging open, and he blamed it on his 2 weeks of travel, etc. There is some very serious mental decline that is going on. It's also physical. I mean, it's not just that he sounded bad, that he couldn't articulate a message, that he couldn't respond to Trump. He also looked frail. And again, any of us who have watched an older relative, a spouse, whatever, become frail, you know that means something. It means the body is breaking down, and it is a matter of time. So it's not just whether or not he could stick in the race and somehow pull it through. If he were to be elected, I think there is very little possibility that he could serve out a full term. And that is unfair. And I feel that the discussion we just had, this is not about whether the Democrats win or the Republicans win. It isn't whether Joe Biden gets to end his career, on a high note. This is about the future of our country. This is about the future of democracy. And it is unbelievably selfish for those around Biden and for Biden himself to hold on to this.
Adam, in the aftermath of this debate performance, you look back and things look like the little things begin to fall into place. So, for example, we wondered, why did he forego that Super Bowl interview? Why would you, that was something inexplicable. Why has he had no press availabilities? Why has he had no press conferences? All of this stuff. There was even a report kind of sneaked in there in NPR and maybe the New York Times that he was taking the back staircase onto Air Force One, and because he didn't want to do all the steps going up the front, it was a shorter entrance somehow. And now it's beginning to fit into a pattern of like they were putting him inside a cocoon and basically hiding him from the public and attempting, I'm sorry, to like put one over on us. Right?
It would be one thing if this was like, if this was his second term and he had 6 months left of it, right? Yeah. And it's like, look, we've got to manage this the end of the term. We're not talking about the end of a second term. We're talking about running for another term. And not just run. It's not like it's, he's running against Bill Clinton or George H.W. Bush where, yeah, there's differences on the margins. You're running against like the authoritarian evil dude, like that's the psycho, right? And so that's why it's so important. And this is the thing is, so after the debate, it's one thing if, yes, you have to release him out there. He has to do these live unscripted events. If he can't do it, these questions aren't going away. So you either have to do them or you're not. If you're not, I guarantee you cannot win this election. If you're incapable of doing it, that's only a question only he and the campaign can answer. But if you're incapable of doing it, I guarantee you, with all of my money and life, I guarantee you're not going to win the election. So that's the bottom line question. Can you go out and push back against this? And so what I've said, I haven't called for him to drop out or anything. I've just said the Democrats have to make the decision, whatever it is, that people like on our party have made, to put the country above the party. And if that's Joe Biden staying in, great. But he's got a lot of work to do in that process to convince the American people that he's up for this job. It's terribly sad, too, because, I was thinking of the video where he's standing there at the Jubilee thing and he looks just lost and confused. And I had been for a long time saying, look, they're using these cheap fake videos, which they were. But that is not going to be a good counter anymore. Now, any cheap fake video where the president looks confused, nobody's going to believe if you push back on it.
That's exactly right. That ship has sailed now, and he confirmed everyone's worst fears. I actually, Linda, I'd be curious to know what you think of it. I also, speaking of ships that have sailed, I mean, my sense is that, he and others are talking about, if he does well in this George Stephanopoulos interview, which is going to drop this weekend. No, I'm sorry, that's not live. I mean, it's going to be clipped and, it's going to be recorded and then edited. Nope, doesn't count. If he does well at his rally in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania this weekend, no, again, reading from a teleprompter, it's kind of, my feeling is that every single day that he delays at this point is really damaging to the cause of the country, which is to find somebody who can potentially defeat Donald Trump. And I have to say, the chances of that are not good right now, even if he does the right thing and drops out, but they certainly get worse every single day that he delays. What do you think?
Well, I think that's right. I mean, and there is a question now, does he just simply release his delegates and let it be solved at the convention? Or does he step down while he's still president and Kamala Harris becomes vice president? And then, if he were to do that, I would hope that there would at least be an agreement that she would be one of the people, that it wouldn't be just presumed that she would be the nominee coming out of the convention, because her poll numbers aren't much better than his. I think in some polls, before the latest fiasco, they were actually worse. She had a worse approval rating than his. But it has to be done. This is not going to get better. There is almost nothing he could do beyond holding press conferences every day and putting his press secretary to the side and getting up there and taking questions day in and day out. They were so proud that
he can't do it.
And he can't do it. They said, he gave a great speech on Monday. It was 4 minutes and he was reading from a teleprompter. That doesn't cut it.
And just to look, I just always think this, the congressman can speak this because he's been in elected office, which I never have. But Linda's point, I think, is so critical. if Joe Biden could do the things that would counteract the notion that he is too old and too incompetent, he would do them. Right?
Exactly.
That's the whole thing. Like if there was a bad clip when the congressman was in office, if there was a clip where he looked like he was out of it or he was saying, he would hold a press conference the next day and literally answer until there were no other questions, right? Just to show.
Yeah.
I mean, again, the congressman's not 81 years old, but the point being, like, he would do that because he can do that. That's the issue. I'm with Linda. Is like, I keep thinking, like, if I'm the Biden campaign, like, just try to put yourself in their shoes. How do you fix this? If you're not already in the bag, like, it's fine, it's not a problem, which is obviously ridiculous. Okay, like, if you recognize this is a huge problem, how do you fix it? Like, if he holds a press conference and he's good, people will say, well, he was good today, but why wasn't he good in the debate? That's the problem. It's like, you can't go back. And what's that movie with Jim Carrey about, like, they go and erase your bad memories? That's what they need to do. Like, you have to collectively go back and erase. Lots of people saw that debate, 50 million, right? And then the people who have subsequently seen, I will tell you this, I watched the debate. I thought from the start, this is really bad for Biden. Then I'm trying to get my 15-year-old into politics, or at least current events. We were in San Diego. So I put the Daily on the next day, just so because he was like, what happened in the debate? Because obviously he didn't watch it. And I was just listening to the clips that they ran of Biden. And I thought, oh my God, like, it's actually even worse than my kind of like initial, like, two screen, like, doing some stuff on Substack and watching it. Like, it's even worse than I thought. And I thought it was really bad. Yeah. And I don't know how you fix the problem, because he can't do the things. Number one, right? He would have already done them. He would have been doing them for months, right, before the debate. And two, even if he could do them now, like, even if he held a press conference every day and he was, like, super lucid, I'm not sure that solves the problem. Yeah,
it would still be tough. So,
and by the way, I might
all
have had
good points. Yeah,
I might have had a few interviews where I was a little too close bottle to throttle. So yeah, that's a pretty accurate thing.
Totally.
Okay, so let me just ask you all about Kamala Harris. So the cleanest, easiest thing in terms of, transferring the money, apparently, that's in the campaign kitty. If she's the candidate, it's very simple. She inherits the whole thing, according to some people. I don't know the ins and outs of the finance law on this, but so if she's the nominee, it's clean in that sense. She doesn't have great poll ratings, but the fact is, people also just haven't seen very much of her. Now, she was not a great candidate in 2020. She kind of flamed out. But is it possible that, in this emergence, I mean, I guess I'm asking, do we have any confidence that she could rise to the occasion here and do better than people think? What do you think, Adam Kinzinger?
I think so. I'm not a Kamala fan, I'll be honest, but I mean, I'd endorse the Hamburglar against Donald Trump. I mean, honestly, so like
me too.
But when she gave an interview after the debate, she was pretty aggressive. She was good at pushing back, and I've started to come around to, like, maybe we haven't given her a chance in that capacity. It's always unfair to vice presidents because they're always kind of in a shadow. They don't get a chance to come out and show their true colors. And the other thing I'm not buying, I think from a Democratic perspective, probably Kamala is the cleanest transition, because if Joe Biden blessed Kamala, I don't think any of these other candidates would jump in. An open convention may be healthier for the party in the long run, to be able to have the delegates actually decide. By the way, it wasn't that long ago that this is how it was done anyway, by the way. So,
right.
But the one argument I'm not buying, particularly from the Biden camp, is the money argument. So it's true.
Oh, okay.
Let's say that Governor Newsom is the guy, right? Yes, Biden Harris can only give him $5,000. That's the limit. I think it's $5,000 right now. But I guarantee you, overnight, the candidate would have 100% name recognition. Overnight, everybody would know about that candidate.
Totally.
And then overnight, the Biden-Harris team could refund the $200 million with a request that they recut those checks to the new candidate. So $200 million could come back as $100 million or $200 million or $300 million. And Act Blue would be overwhelmed by the number of small donors on the internet motivated to catch up to where Donald Trump is. Money, there's a threshold in politics now you have to reach in money to be known, but every dollar above that is almost worthless and doesn't move numbers.
So interesting. And Linda, on the congressman's point about the 100% name ID that you would get immediately, that's so true. And in addition to that, there would, like most voters have been trudging toward this election with the sense of terrible dread. They are so unenthusiastic about it. If there were a new candidate, there would be a tremendous rush of excitement and energy, and you wouldn't actually need much more than that to get people energized, right?
Absolutely. In fact, conventions are absolutely the most boring thing in the world that you can watch. Nobody tunes in. I mean, even political junkies like us, yeah, we do it because we have to. But I usually fall asleep at some point in the evening. And if you look, obviously the cleanest thing would be just to turn it all over to Kamala Harris. I don't think that's the best option. I think she ought to be one of the people that throws her hat in the ring, that it's an open convention. And if you had a real open convention with people coming on, basically giving speeches, introducing themselves, I think you'd get a huge television audience. Lots of people would be paying attention. And I think it would be the healthiest thing for the Democratic Party. And I think it would drive Trump crazy. That suddenly the Democrats were getting all of the attention. I mean, what has been really surprising, he's somebody who can never avoid trying to get, the attention to himself. He's been very quiet this week, and that's because he thinks everything that's going on right now is going to redound to his benefit.
Right. Chris, what about it's anti-democratic argument if you have an open convention? Because, it's not the voters. All the voters picked Biden in the primaries, and now you're going to have a bunch of elites, namely the delegates, choosing. What do you make of that?
I mean, I would argue, honestly, I'm pro open convention because I think it actually is more consistent. If I had to ask Adam Kinzinger how he got to where he is, he would say, I think, Congressman, correct me if I'm wrong, he would say country over party, right? It's more important that, capital D democracy matters more than the Democratic Party or the Republican Party or anything, right? It seems to me odd to say okay, Joe Biden can't win. We got to get rid of him. We're going to slot this other person in who you sort of kind of voted for, but really you voted for the president. I mean, I'm sure there are people who voted for the Biden-Harris ticket because of Kamala Harris, but the vast, vast, vast majority of people will vote for the president. We're going to slot this person in, and we're going to do it because not because we think it's the right thing to do, but because we think it's the thing that will help us win the most. I actually think you can make a very credible argument to say we're the capital D democracy party. Kamala Harris is going to be one of these people. Anyone else can. And yes, the delegates are not, there are 3,500 of them or whatever. There aren't 330 million of them. So natural, and they're political people and all that sort of thing. But it's at least an opportunity to say, here are the options, and we're going to give these people an option to vote. So I'm sort of pro that. I think it actually affirms the broader, democracy matters more, keeping the capital D democracy matters more than what is politically, the easiest thing to do. I just want to echo one other point. Literally, if this Starbucks cup became the Democratic nominee tomorrow against Donald Trump, this Starbucks cup would raise $750 to $1 billion for its candidacy. there is the idea that whoever it is, Gavin Newsom, pick someone you don't even know, pick some random rank and file House member, okay, who's a Democrat. There is so much anti-Trump money out in the country. The idea that we would be in a huge financial hole. A presidential race against Donald Trump is not going to be lost for want of money on the other side. It's just not going. Presidential races are not lost because of money. Hillary Clinton outspent Donald Trump vastly and
That's
won.
true.
Joe Biden outspent Donald Trump narrowly and won. Like, it's just not. I just want to echo what the congressman is saying. The idea, you can think Kamala Harris should be the VP, should be the candidate. She's earned it. There are lots of justifications for it. Again, I disagree that you should just default her. But the idea that the money thing is somehow determinative is absolutely and totally ridiculous.
Okay. That was a really interesting discussion. So thank you all for that. And we're going to come to our final segment, which is the highlight or lowlight of the week. But first, we're going to hear from BetterHelp. So a lot of the time, all of us, when we're dealing with emotional challenges, and I have to say this past week, I was dealing with quite a few between the aftermath of the debate and the Supreme Court. We tend to get into loops of thinking about other people's lives and thinking that they have it all together and that others are happier and more organized and, altogether better off than we are. And, experts say that comparison is the thief of joy, that it's so easy to envy other people's lives. So therapy can help you focus on what you want instead of what others have, so you can start living your best life. And so I urge you to think about BetterHelp. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. You just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. And by the way, you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge if the fit isn't right. So stop comparing yourself to other people and start focusing on you with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/beg-to-differ today and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/beg-to-differ. And we thank them for sponsoring this podcast. All right, we have come to our highlight or lowlight of the week segment. And before we get to that, I just want to hear a little bit of a report from Linda, because Linda has traveled to Israel in the past couple of weeks. And so, Linda, can you just give us your impressions?
I will do two in one. I will make this my highlight of the week.
Okay, great.
I am in Israel. I've spent 4 days here, and one of those days, 9 hours, I spent going to all of the sites of the massacre on October 7th. I went to the Shuva Junction, which is where the Israeli military, when they were finally able to get in to try to provide medical help to the people who had been killed at the Nova Music Festival. I went to see a display of 1,600 totally destroyed, burned out cars that were destroyed on October 7th. But the final and ultimate point of the trip was going to the Nova Musical Festival, where nearly 400 young people, beautiful young people living their lives, died. This was searing. It was extremely emotional, and it put me in mind to understand what is going on in this war and why it is that Hamas cannot be allowed to win.
Thank you for that very much. Adam Kinzinger.
Yeah, look, I guess my highlight would be Cara Mund, who ran for Congress in North Dakota. She ran as an anti-Trump. She said that, I am an anti-Trump Republican. She's also pro-choice, which is a disappearing thing in the GOP. And she ended up, this was a few weeks ago now, she ended up getting close to 20% in the race, which is actually pretty amazing in a primary. But the reason I did a radio show with her today on her radio show, and to me, it's just like, you're going to lose if you're an anti-Trump Republican in a primary, but taking a stand and doing the right thing and not succumbing to the pressure, to me, is a highlight. And that's what I would say this week.
Well, thank you for that. Okay, Chris Cillizza.
I have a brief, I'm going highlight because I feel like there's been a lot of low light. So I'm going highlight to end on a positive note.
Same reason.
Yes. And mine is a journalist, Gabe Fleischer, who many of us know. He's been writing a newsletter since he was 8 years old on politics. That's right, 8 years old. He is 22. He just graduated from my alma mater, Georgetown. He is now on Substack. I would recommend him, not just because of his age and because of the kind of, oh, this is an interesting thing, a young kid. Optimistic, interesting perspective, smart, thoughtful. It's called Wake Up to Politics. I would recommend it to people.
Okay, thank you for that. I want to recommend a piece by my Bulwark colleague, Kathy Young. Kathy grew up in the old USSR until she was about 16 when her family immigrated here. And she is one of the most incisive writers out there right now. And she has a way of drilling down to the essence of things. And so when, if you've written something sloppy or intellectually lazy and Kathy decides to come after you, you're in big trouble. Okay. So Neil Ferguson, who's very distinguished and, a professor and a historian of an economic historian and so forth. Well, he wrote a dumb piece about how comparing our country, the United States, to late stage the Soviet Union, and he claimed that it's now Soviet America. And he made these facile comparisons. He said, we're run by a gerontocracy and we have problems with drug addiction and we can't control our borders. And, Kathy weighs in and she says, well, hang on. First of all, when it came to controlling their borders, let's not forget that the Soviet Union's idea of controlling its borders was putting up walls and fences so that people couldn't get out. And ours are to prevent people from getting in, whatever you may think about those. But that's a very important distinction. She goes through and just decimates this article, one sort of fatuous point after the next. We are not Soviet America. We have lots of problems, God knows. But if you want to read someone who is really a very skilled writer and takes apart, as I said, lazy or sloppy thinking, I can't recommend Kathy Young enough. And with that, I want to thank our guest, Adam Kinzinger. Thank you so much. I hope you'll come back often. And of course, it's always great to have Chris Cillizza, practically a regular. And Linda Chavez. And I want to also thank our wonderful producer, Jim Swift, and our viewers and listeners, and beg to differ. We'll return next week as every week. Oh, and I should wish everyone a happy 4th of July, despite everything. Keep the faith.